Wednesday. Cheers and welcome to this week's episode of Trades Lady Happy Hour. Hope everybody's having a fantastic day and is excited for tonight's Trades Lady Happy Hour. I'm glad to have you guys all here. I want to take a quick moment and thank the amazing sponsor that we have, Drive Time, for helping make this possible to continue doing Trades Lady Happy Hour and for their support of women in the trades. So a big thanks to them. And of course, I want to thank all of you for tuning in and hanging out with me. We've got a really awesome guest today. I'm very excited to hang out with her. Anne Polly, she is a woman who I've had the great fortune of being able to work with on the current all-female build going on at the shop, the Iron Maven. She is a mechanical engineer, and she's got a ton of experience in a range of different arenas. Not the traditional kind of tradeswoman that we have on this show, but I think equally interesting and potentially really interesting to see different perspectives. She's a mechanical engineer, like I said. She specializes in CAD design and additive manufacturing and product development. So she's done product development for a couple of major automotive manufacturers. She does some cool stuff on the side that we'll talk about a little bit as well. She builds really big things that do really awesome things and makes fire and makes art, and I don't know. She's going to explain it better than I can, but it's really awesome. She's a very cool woman. I'm excited to have her join us. For those of you who are new, this is the weekly show where we get to hang out with a different awesome woman every week and hear their story, learn about them, hear about their journey, how they got to where they are. And it's really about shining a light on women doing trades, like out there kicking butt in the trades. There's not a lot of us. We're a small percentage of trade folks out there, but there are a ton of us at the same time, if that makes sense. And generally speaking, you only hear about the same ones on social media, on TV. And so this is about me taking the little bit of a platform that I've been fortunate to have and sharing that by shining a light on other amazing women who are out there who deserve a ton of respect and a ton of props. And this week's guest is no different. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Anne in to join the room. I see that she just joined.
Hey.
All right. Hi, lovely. How are you?
I'm doing great. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, thank goodness. Yeah, I can hear you great.
Were you having technical issues?
Oh, I was trying to figure out how to prop my phone up without having it fall over.
Oh, I feel you. I came home. I've been having a day, man. I came home because our internet at the shop was crap, and I was like, crap, we gotta like hurry up and get home and set up. And then I thought that I left my tripod in Florida, and so I was freaking out, and then my air conditioning stopped working, and then it's been a day. Oh, but I'm really glad that you're here. I'm excited.
Same.
Is this your first Instagram Live? What's that?
It's been like a whole couple weeks since we last.
I know. It's been crazy. We miss you. We have more projects for you, and I want to hear all about your new job, if you're allowed to talk about it and how it's going. A little bit. All right. Well, let's introduce you to everybody who's watching who doesn't know how amazing you are. Tell the fine folks at home who you are, where you're from, and what you do in a nutshell.
Hi everyone. My name is Anne. I am based in the San Francisco Bay Area. So right now I'm working with Bogey and Girl Gang Garage to integrate kind of CAD and engineering and 3D printing into the Iron Maven build. So we're doing kind of custom components like the antenna fin and the handles and kind of the vent routing and the camera housing, kind of all these little more product design type things that we can 3D print and then finish to match the rest of the car and make it look like it belongs there the whole time.
It's so awesome. Like, side note to everybody, we're probably going to talk about this a little bit more, but like, you know, doing a crazy build like the Iron Maven, there's a ton of products that like, or parts that just don't exist because nobody does this. This is stupid. This is ridiculous what we're doing with this build. And so without Anne and her contribution and others from Women in 3D Printing who've been helping out, but Anne's been like hugely instrumental in making these crazy parts that just don't exist in the world. But this is nothing new for you. Like this is what you do.
Yeah, so professionally, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I've kind of been focusing more on product development with kind of a little bit of robotics and automotive thrown in. So I've worked on all kinds of things. I've worked on like consumer products. I've worked on consumer electronics. I've worked on kind of testing fixtures for automotive companies. I've done like some robotics work. I did some like crazy animatronics work, just all kinds of stuff. But the theme is all of this CAD, which is 3D modeling, like 3D printing and prototyping and manufacturing. So right now, the job that Bogey alluded to that I just started is working on the Google Pixel phones. So I get to tear stuff apart, see how well it assembles together, and we try to figure out better ways to assemble things so that they, last longer, they work better, they're lighter, they're easier for people to build, just all those good things.
I love it. And I love that like you kind of toggle the world of engineering as well as the automotive world a little bit, and just there's so much overlap now. I feel like with engine. I mean, there's always been an overlap with engineering in cars, but like particularly additive manufacturing and 3D printing. I don't know. It's like the wave of the future with cars, and I think it hasn't been integrated a whole heck of a lot. So you kind of toggle in these two worlds, doing manufacturer side and engineering side. I feel like engineering has done a better job of embracing STEM and STEM women, I should say, like making more moves towards bringing women in and neutralizing. I'm curious your experiences across these two different industries. Like how has it been being a woman in these two kind of arenas, engineering and the automotive space?
Mm-hmm. So in mechanical engineering, the number of women in our field is definitely increasing. So when I started as a student, my program was 9% female. And when I finished, 5-6 years later, we were 14% female. That's a pretty significant increase.
That is a significant increase. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, and just like everywhere you go, some places are welcoming, some places are less welcoming. You kind of have to navigate just like you do in the rest of the world. Kind of find your place, make your space.
Have the automotive jobs been any more or less than some of your non-automotive jobs?
I've definitely found that there are fewer women in automotive than some other fields like consumer products. I'm I'm always not quite sure if it's the area that the jobs are based in, if it's kind of the type of work being more male dominated traditionally. It's always really hard to tell exactly what the different factors are and what the biggest impacts are.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. And I appreciate the balanced look at that. Like, it could be lots of different things. Obviously, automotive has, like, way less women in it than engineering as a whole. But have you experienced any of, like, the specific kind of pushes to bring more women into engineering?
Uh-oh. Oh, definitely.
Do we have a delay here?
I'm going to plug my phone in really make me nervous.
Okay.
Oh, I'm nervous. I'm worried it's going to die. Okay, there we go.
Uh-oh. Were you able to hear me?
Are we good?
Yeah. We've got a little delay going on,
but okay. Hopefully it passes. Yes. But yeah, so I've kind of been involved in a lot of different programs, both where I work and with groups like Girl Gang Garage and kind of groups like the artist group that I work with, that are kind of specifically focused on bringing more women in, and not like not only kind of bringing more women into the field, but making a community for women who are already in the field, to just have a different type of group. So, for example, I'm typically on a day-to-day basis, most of the people that I work with are men, but having those kind of women-focused support groups and communities is really, really helpful for just getting a different group of people than I normally talk to, but are still kind of in the same thing and the same type of field, and we can chat about our projects. It's really great.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's something that's hard to explain sometimes to people, like why there's value in that, like why do women need separate groups to kind of participate in, and like why that matters. And it's also too, I think women in the trades often feel like we're the only ones experiencing this, and yet there's all these like ancillary kind of careers where women are also the minority and experience the same exact stuff, like that I experience as a mechanic or a painter experiences as a painter. And I think there's something nice about, and part of why I wanted to have you on as a guest was to kind of be able to share and show that it's not just the trades. It's really any male dominated field. It's not just automotive. And even when you have higher percentages like you guys do, that it's still so crucial and important to have those connections.
Yeah, and it's really valuable too to talk to people in different fields and get their experience, because obviously I experienced the engineering side, but it's great to talk to people like you, Bogey, who can kind of speak to their experience in the trades. And there's people in the sciences, there's people in the arts that experience the same thing.
Which is a good transition into your art stuff. Talk to me about this crazy art that you do and how it crosses all of these different bridges and things that you do. It's like kind of this collaboration of all the things that you do into one thing, which is kind of fun. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so one of the groups that I work with is called Flaming Lotus Girls, and our group is definitely not all women, but we are a women focused collective of people from all different backgrounds. Like, we have people in medical, we have engineers, we have people who are full-time artists, like just every type of background we have in our group. But kind of the thing that pulls everyone together is this desire to have a group that is specifically open to anybody of any representation, to just build these big art projects. So we build big metal art and big fire art. So just those huge art projects that you see on at Burning Man, like who that builds those. So it's just really fun, and we have a place for people of every experience to come in. Like, you need super experienced TIG welders just as much as you need people who just picked up an angle grinder but are willing to clean up all of the welds and clean up all of the edges, and like
how the heck
we can bring anybody in and get them excited.
I love it. I mean, it's like what we do at Girl Gang, right? Like, everybody is welcome to come and play, no matter what your skill level is. Everybody has something to add to the pot. How the heck did you get into that?
Because I wanted to learn how to use an angle grinder, and this is you hear all kinds of stories in the Bay Area of people who have never used a grinder, never used a welder, kind of came to our group, took our little 101 classes, and develop their skills and went on to start their own groups, join other groups, like work on different types of art, just all kinds of stuff. It's kind of a place that is willing to teach people from the ground up, which is kind of kind of rare. Just like Girl Gang Garage, it's oftentimes to find an entry point. Often difficult to find an entry point.
It is indeed. Like, I get questions all the time, like, where do I find someplace else like this in my part of the country? There's just not a lot of places for somebody who knows nothing to be able to say, I want to learn how to use an angle grinder. Like, what made you, like, what prompted that? Because you went from there to, like, building larger than life, fire breathing metal sculptures.
Oh man, it was just a cool thing. Like I actually, so I first found out about our group at Maker Faire, which is like, it was one of the, as far as I was concerned, it was one of the greatest events that I'd ever been to. Like, just people with their little hacky prototypes of their ideas, all the way up until, giant monster trucks that people had built, and like fire art shooting off in the corner. And I don't know, the fire art was the thing that spoke to me.
Clearly. I love it. So, and do you do other stuff besides the CAD design with that? I'm assuming you're involved in kind of all the different levels of those builds, yeah?
Honestly, I mainly just angle grind stuff because it's nice, it's relaxing.
That's your zen. That's your happy place, that grinding.
Yeah, it's really nice sometimes to not have to stare at a computer screen.
That is fair. Is that where like the desire came from? Like, why like what made you one day be like, I really want to know how to use a grinder?
I don't even know. I like doing projects that are different than what I do during the day. It's really important for me to have variety.
And you do a lot of building in other ways too. I mean, you're right, with your main job, you're probably doing a lot of like, you're virtually building, right? In CAD, you're doing this virtual building, but then outside of work, you're building these crazy robots, and then you've also been building all sorts of other stuff. Like, what's your other project that you've got going on with your camper truck thing?
Oh, that's true. I just have a forever project to keep making tweaks to my camper van. They're never done.
No, projects are never done, as anybody can tell who's worked on a car or had a project car. They are never finished.
Yeah, somehow stuff breaks.
I know.
Stuff.
Have you always been like the kid that worked with their hands and liked building and making and doing? And
so, funny enough, both of my parents are engineers. So,
are they mechanical or
really grew up with it? A little more academic, actually.
Okay.
I was always much more hands-on than either of them ever were.
Is there a reason that drew you to mechanical engineering versus any of the other millions of things that you could have done?
So, funny enough, I started college as an agricultural engineer because I was really into horticulture in high school. I was in the ag program. I was an FFA member. I did competitive forestry for FFA.
Competitive forestry?
Yeah, like identifying trees and like all that.
I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah, it exists.
Are there a lot of women in competitive forestry?
It's kind of a thing that you can only do if you're in kind of high school age.
Okay.
But yeah, I was really into horticulture in high school, and like working in the greenhouse and growing plants and figuring out all the little details of running that kind of operation. And so I went to college and I said, okay, I'm I'm going to learn how to build greenhouses. Like, I'm going to save the world with greenhouses. And so, and I just started taking classes and found that I was much more interested in the mechanical side of things. And
Oh,
so it made sense to do mechanical.
How were you exposed to? Is it just through like basic classes you had to take for your degree and you found interest in it, or like what spurred the diversion? Like how did you get exposed to it to say yes, that's more interesting to me?
Yeah, so when you start out in engineering school, you take more general classes your first year or two.
Okay.
So I kind of started out taking just general mechanics, like taking physics, and I was just much more just kind of drawn to the mechanical side of things. And everybody who goes into engineering school learns a CAD program right off the bat. Like you do kind of simple projects, you take a general engineering design course that's relevant to any major that you're in. And they intentionally introduce you to some different fields to
Okay.
see if it might be something you're interested in.
Interesting. Is it common for people to switch it up from what they
Mm,
expected?
definitely. It's common. I think it's common for anybody going into college to
That's a fair
switch
point.
their major. We had like there were lots of people that left engineering entirely and switched to a different major. There were people who started out in a different major and switched to engineering. It's they you have a lot of mobility when you're starting out to choose a different path.
What school did you go to?
I did Penn State for both bachelor's and master's, and
Okay.
yeah, so another quirk. I also did a music degree, so I could not decide between engineering and music going into college, and so
Okay.
I just went in both, and somehow made it to the end.
What kind of music are you? Do you play an instrument? Are you a singer? Like what kind of music?
Yeah, I play flute, mainly kind of orchestral music. Um,
How did
but
I not know this?
but I actually did music technology. Uh, so I took all the general music classes, and then towards the end, when you get a little bit more focused on focused on exactly what you're trying to do, whether that be performance or teaching or technology, like I just kind of started taking all the technology classes. So I took, theater classes and uh, studio engineering classes and like composition classes, and just learned a little bit of everything on how to record music and edit music. And I can't say that I was really great at it, but but I had a lot of fun, and I am glad.
That's all that matters, right?
Yeah.
So you've always been kind of more on the technical side of things, whether it was music or otherwise. You always got into that technical side.
Hmm.
Do you think if your parents weren't engineers and you weren't exposed to that kind of environment growing up, do you think you would still find yourself in the same place?
It's really hard. It's really hard to tell, and people, everyone has a different experience. So there's kind of an interesting social dynamic that specifically like this amazing woman named Debbie Sterling talks about. So she started a company called Goldie Blocks that makes engineering toys for young girls. And she has an amazing TED talk that everyone needs to go watch. It's maybe 20 minutes long, and it might make you cry a little. But it's so she talks a lot about how growing up, a lot of girls grow up with less access to building type toys and like more, hands-on toys and hands-on tools. So a lot of times yay, someone commented.
Oh.
Yay, Debbie Sterling. But Agreed. But so a lot of like women who are coming into especially mechanical engineering uh, come in with a little bit less of a background in the spatial reasoning skills. And Debbie Sterling in her talk, she talks about like how she went into engineering. She was already studying engineering, and she kind of felt like she had to play catch up with learning all those spatial reasoning skills and like drafting skills and drawing skills that a lot of the boys in her class had been working with from the very beginning.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I know I experienced in automotive school. Going for my mechanics degree, my associates. It was like I was coming to it later in life. I hadn't been exposed to this stuff when I was a kid. Like I didn't grow up around cars. I didn't understand it. And like all of these boys that I was in school with who were like 5 years younger than me, like just knew this stuff. Like they just had been around it for so long. They've been playing with cars since they were little kids, and it was like a little overwhelming. And I think adds to that layer of you don't belong kind of feeling because you haven't been exposed to it all the way along, and
Mm-hmm.
it kind of creates an interesting thing psychologically.
Yeah, it goes deep. all of this.
It really does. Did you experience that going to engineering school? Same thing you talked about.
I I mean I did grow up with a lot of that kind of community of people who were doing technical work and having access to a lot of those kind of toys and tools and experience. I grew up kind of in the middle of the woods, and so I grew up shoveling asphalt and like just using power tools because that's just what you do when you live out there.
Sure.
Everyone kind of does their bit.
Yeah, you lived out in the woods, and now you live in the Bay Area.
Yeah, it's different. I do like the Bay Area a lot. Obviously, I chose to move to the Bay Area partially because it's a great place for the type of work that I do, but it's just there's so many people like you know like you said, a lot of people that live in places that don't have those entry points uh, are looking for groups, and if you're not in one of those areas that has access to a lot of that, it can be more difficult to get into what you're looking to learn.
So you had kind of this advantage in a sense of having
Mhm.
engineer parents and
Yeah.
having grown up in a place where you were working with your hands a lot and being exposed to all of the different things. What if any challenges did you encounter going through engineering school and getting into your first jobs? Like, tell me about that experience for you.
Yeah, I honestly like so my senior year of undergrad, like when I was finishing my bachelor's, I actually wanted to go into automotive, and there were kind of a lot of reasons that I decided to go a different path. Like robots just kind of called to me at one point there, and I was like, "Ooh, I want to learn more about that," and
Okay.
kind of decided to stay in school a bit longer. But so I joined an automotive program my senior year, and like kind of kind of had a rough time at different points. I was the only woman in a group of 40 plus people. So there were definitely some weird social dynamics with that. Like it's not when you're working with kind of a group of young people that kind of call each other out, it's not necessarily overt. It's more usually it's more kind of little microaggressions or just being left out of something. So you miss those opportunities to learn all those little details that you really need to do a project.
Can we talk about that a little bit more? Because I feel like
Definitely.
that's the stuff that's really hard to communicate to, as women in the trades, kind of going back to like what we were talking about earlier, like why it's important to be able to connect with other women doing this kind of stuff is like, if you're not experiencing it, if you're not a minority in whatever field you work in, like it's hard to understand what those microaggressions are. Like, and we hear that word tossed around, but like, what does it actually mean? Like, I think people think like if there isn't overt sexism happening, if there isn't an overt like denial of opportunity, like how debilitating that can still be, and what microaggressions are and look like. Can you talk a little bit more about like what kind of stuff you experienced and what those things are and how they affected you?
Yeah. It's just all the little things that add up. Like if you're invited less to social settings, even if you're not talking about work or not talking about your projects for most of the time, it's still like that's still kind of how you pick up all the knowledge and skills. Is just you talk to people for hours, and maybe you get little tidbits of information, and like that's how you build up your tribal knowledge. And like that's really the most valuable experience. It's not the stuff that someone's written in a book. It's all the little like niche bits of knowledge that that like make you a really valuable engineer. So if you're kind of less included in those circles, or just have less access to those conversations, then it really really adds up over time.
Were there any other types of things you experienced aside from just not being included in stuff? And I don't mean just like that's a small thing, because that is a huge thing. I think you're absolutely right. Were there other things that you experienced?
There was definitely some overt sexism, not necessarily from the the people who were the same age as me that I talked to every day, but from people who were kind of industry veterans, uh, that make some jokes that just aren't funny. Or and kind of when you're getting into industry, you really need those more experienced people to advocate for you and kind of help pull you up in the group or in the company. And if you have, if someone has to choose who they're kind of going to pull up to their level, they usually choose the person that is most like them. And for women, that's usually not the case.
Right, because there isn't a lot of women there to be in a position to pull us up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if the person in power and the person in the leadership position isn't supportive of women in the career
Mm-hmm.
paths, then we never get that mentorship. We never get that growth opportunity.
Exactly. And even though there are a lot more women entering the industry, you start out at the bottom. So a lot of that middle management is male, and those are the people that are really your biggest advocates and make a huge difference in your success at your role.
And that you experienced, this was in the mechanical program, the automotive program that you were looking into. Is that why you chose to leave that and not pursue that further?
Um, it definitely had an impact. There were definitely other factors, like I was involved in music, and working in an industrial city was less had less of a like availability for music groups and going to concerts and all of that than moving to a city like San Francisco or Phoenix, that is just less industrial, more has more of an art scene. And also I decided to stay in school for my master's, and I just kind of ended up exploring a lot of different areas. So I explored robotics, and I also was able to explore product design. And mainly, I hadn't really been exposed to that during undergrad because we were kind of a general mechanical engineering program. So you learned a little bit of everything, but uh, product product design was just kind of a little piece of one class that we learned. And so I started doing a lot of CAD work just for fun, actually. I, I like, the way to learn something is you do some projects for fun because you're not good at it. No one's paying you to do to do it at the beginning.
Right.
So I kind of clunkily started out in that, like got into 3D printing, started working with Autodesk, and then that was one of the biggest things that introduced me to product design was working with Autodesk because they were kind of like, we did a lot of CAD work that was demonstrating how product designers use CAD, and I kind of had to fake being a product designer in order in order to kind of make content for them. And so somehow I ended up just liking it a lot, and it was my favorite type of work that I had done. It's just like there's so much that goes into it. There's like aesthetic surfacing, there's also manufacturing, which is like giant power tools, which I'm all about.
Who doesn't like power tools?
Yeah, power tools are great.
I have a lot of questions at this point because I like. First, I just have to say I love that like so many of these threads in your life kind of like still came all back together, right? Like the interest in automotive, you still wound up doing product design for automotive manufacturing. Mm-hmm. Like all of these different pieces still wound up tying a thread throughout your life and pulling it all together with the robotics and the design and the art and all of the rest of the things. But I'm curious because we skipped a little piece there. Like, how did you wind up working with Autodesk? Were you still in school when that happened? Like when you were doing the fake it till you make it, pretending to be a product designer? Like...
Yeah, I got an internship with them doing content creation. So I was doing content creation for their education department.
Okay.
And there were a bunch of us that were students who were not only making content, but we were also hosting workshops and just kind of advocating and being, representing software and representing the company on campus.
Interesting. So what started as you just playing with CAD design on your own for fun? Like, was that like it was just for funsies that you got involved in 3D printing initially? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was an engineering student, so yes. I was working on projects for classes and for clubs.
Okay. And then here you are, like doing all sorts of craziness. So, what was the course after college? Like after your graduate school, after all of that, what were next steps for you, and how did you wind up where you're at now? But I think particularly of interest, I think to probably a lot of folks watching, and I think I hear from people all the time, how does one get to work for a manufacturer designing things, right? How does that end up happening? How did you get there, and what was it like working with
Well, it can be difficult, like coming into something having not as many skills as some of the other people who are looking. I think probably the most important thing is just being enthusiastic. I know it's really corny sounding, but like having a genuine interest in what you're trying to do, it really shows. Like I've done interviews, I've interviewed people. You can tell if they actually want to do the engineering work and if they're actually interested in what you're building, versus if they're just looking for a job.
Right, looking for a
paycheck. It really, enthusiasm really shows.
So you've applied for positions that you felt like you didn't have the necessarily the same credentials or experience as somebody else and were able to get that position anyway. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, my first job out of college, I was definitely the least experienced person there on my team. But I clearly had the interest. I had built up kind of the hard skills, like the CAD skills, and just the type of thinking that you need to design things from scratch. And so it's kind of a bunch of little pieces, and you never have all the pieces, but you have to kind of demonstrate that you have the motivation to fill in those gaps in your knowledge and just put in the work.
I feel like that needs to be said like 100 times over, right? Like you never have all the pieces ever. I think like you're always learning, and how far enthusiasm carries you. I feel like that's a thing that I think women particularly get hung up on. It's like, well, I don't know it all yet.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I'm not good enough. I'm not able to do the work, right? Like we beat ourselves up, I think, a lot more than at least the men that I know.
Yeah, I've heard kind of some interesting commentary on women applying for jobs and being less likely to apply for jobs, or maybe like applying for fewer jobs than the average man, just because you look at the list of requirements, and if you're missing maybe 3 of them, a lot of people won't apply because they think that they're missing the skills that they need to get the job. But that's just not true. You can have like half of the skills if you can show that you have the motivation and you have the kind of the building blocks to build those skills.
Yeah, the drive and the desire to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've been fortunate, especially early in your career, to find employers that actually believed in that, like, that believed in giving people a chance.
Yeah, I've actually somewhat switched career paths in the last 2 years or so. So I kind of switched from being a full mechanical engineer slash product design engineer who was in CAD all day, to switching to being more of a program manager who's not necessarily in CAD, but we're trying to get the high level picture, like where we're pulling together groups of people to give input on things, and we're hosting design reviews, and we're pulling together all this information and quantifying it and benchmarking all the different options, and just figuring out the best ways to make these decisions on how something's designed or how something's manufactured. And it's been, I had never had a program manager job before I became a program manager. But I kind of advocated for myself, and was able to prove that I had the skills and the motivation.
I feel like that's the biggest stumbling block for so many, is being able to advocate for themselves even if they've not done the thing before. Did you ever like feel hesitant to do that? Like where did that come from in you, that skill set of being willing to say, I don't know this, but I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to find my way into a position?
So my first job out of college, I worked in consulting, and anybody who's worked in consulting knows that sometimes you have to just be a little more confident than you feel when you're talking with clients, because there's so many different types of projects that you work on in the consulting field, that you just get thrown into things. You don't it's not like you're applying for a job. You're given a job, and you just have to figure out how to do it. So I never worked on any medical projects, and then I was leading a medical device project, and I kind of just had to fill in the gaps in order to get a project done.
I like that. Be more confident than you feel. Like, that's a great sentence. And I think acknowledging that, like, that we think we all have those times, right? Like that we don't feel confident. I think there's often the illusion that other people are like more capable and more confident, more whatever than us. Like, I think we're all faking it sometimes.
Yeah, and like I've gotten better at saying yes to things that just like yes to, I want to take this class, or I want to be involved in this project, or I want to talk to this person that I might not have talked to otherwise. Like kind of just reaching out and talking to people that are come from a different background than me.
Doing things even though they might intimidate you.
Hmm. Yeah, or just taking an interest in things
Yeah.
that aren't necessarily what I have experience in.
Yeah.
And like sometimes just admitting that I don't know something, because sometimes like if you ask someone about their work, you can say I don't know anything about building a circuit board. Like
Yeah.
tell
I know.
me tell me what you're working on. And,
I know nothing about probably 90% of the things that you do, Anne.
oh man, I don't change my own oil, like you know.
That's why we make great friends. I can do the stuff you can't, and you can do all the stuff I can't.
Yeah, exactly. That's why engineering teams are rarely just one person.
Right.
You always have four different kinds of engineers on the
Yeah.
same.
Okay, let's talk about engineers on the automotive space, because I think every mechanic has had those multiple times during a day where we say, "God damn engineers." So I've heard different reasonings as to why things sometimes wind up in ways that us technicians are cursing you guys throughout our day. What, like, tell me what things look like on the development side when you're working in the automotive space.
Oh man. Okay, so first off, a lot of times you're designing things on a computer, on kind of modern designs and modern mechanical design and modern like automotive design. So it's kind of a skill that you build over time to be able to look at a computer screen and accurately accurately gauge exactly how that part's being made and how well it fits and how much of a gap you need and how much clearance you need for a wrench and all that fun stuff. Like when I did robotics, some robotics work, we actually modeled the wrenches in on the computer to make sure that there was space to fit.
Thank you for that. Mechanics across the world, thank you for that.
Yeah, because well, we weren't my robotics work. We weren't really building that many of them, and so the techs knew where we sat, and
They knew where to find you to come
yeah,
curse at you.
they knew who we were, and
I love it.
but yeah, so it's definitely it can definitely be difficult to translate what you're working on the computer to how well it fits together in real life. Uh,
Yeah.
and then so it's always really iterative, pulling together all those different subsystems and pulling just pulling it all together. So there's an engine isn't built by one person. That's impossible. So you could have 20 mechanical engineers all building different CAD pieces for the entire vehicle. And all of those engineers have to have to be doing their modeling, have to be doing all the analysis of how well something's working, and they also have to be talking to each other on to make sure
That's the one.
everything fits together. And a lot of times you're coming up with trade-offs, so you can't make the perfect version of everything. Like, what if the perfect radiator is massive? And like you can't have the person who's engineering the radiator just own the whole engine bay. Like the the person designing the HVAC is going to get angry.
Right.
So there's kind of a lot of compromise that happens between all the different components and all the different uh like features and all the different people who are working on the project. And nobody gets everything they want. You kind of have to be willing to look at a problem and come up with the best solution together.
I remember, so it was somebody from the Autodesk actually, when they came to and did a program at the shop. It was just this idea that like you have all of these different departments designing different things, and yes, they talk to each other, but like sometimes the design is happening in a vacuum from these other things, and then it's the
Mhm.
trade. Like, I need a bracket over here. Well, I need a bracket over here, and like, how do we make that work? And then us mechanics are like, why the hell did they put that bracket over there? And it's all of these layers of things that we tend to not think about as mechanics and just get the fallout of. And on the flip side, I think engineers don't necessarily like always think about like how do I get my hand in there.
Yeah, yeah, like, and there are only so many prototypes you can make, especially just really, really big stuff like automotive builds. Prototyping is a big challenge. Uh, how do you all of the plastics in a car are injection molded, and figuring out how to prototype everything and fit it all together and test it, it's like you never get it right on the first time. Like if you look at cars from the 1961 Volvo to the 2019 Volvo, there's
Different
a lot of progress. Like every single year, everything gets a little bit better. Like you fix your mistakes from the year before, ideally.
Ideally.
Your mistakes from the year before on the next year's car.
Yes.
And just over time you make a lot of progress, but it's all incremental.
Well, and from the prototyping perspective, I mean, how many different prototypes did we go through with each of the pieces that you were helping us work on with Iron Maven? What, like 7 or 8 different camera surrounds, and until we got the right one. And that was just a little teeny tiny, like little nothing piece, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's how you end up with those wild looking mufflers, because they're just like, oh man, like we have to avoid this other thing and get around that, and
Right.
like you definitely end up with some funny looking components on cars.
Yeah. There's definitely things on the Volvo where I'm like, did they just build the entire car around this one bolt? Like, how did that happen?
I mean, honestly, maybe
All right, fair enough. I love it. Um, I want to talk. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but I have more questions for you. If you're okay with going like slightly over.
Oh, sure.
3D printing and additive manufacturing in the automotive space specifically, have you like seen a large acceleration of that integration over recent years? How I think sometimes people are surprised at how long it has been happening, but